This is Whitley Strieber. Before we start today, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that I will be doing a weekly news update at the beginning of every program starting next week. And the bad and extremely sad news is that Linda Moulton Howe is going on hiatus because of the inability of our company to continue to pay her salary. After 10 years of being a very good customer of our bank, of paying our credit line religiously, on time, for all of those years, our bank has abandoned us, and we no longer have a credit line at all, like so many small businesses. It has nothing to do whatsoever with our credit and everything to do with the crisis that the banking industry is in now. Unfortunately, this means that we are no longer able to afford Linda Moulton Howe and Dana Augustine, and there are likely to be reductions in other areas of the website at all. Hopefully, we will eventually be able to increase our subscriber base and the wonderful service that Unknown Country offers, both to its subscribers and as a free service, will be able to continue and expand the way it should. There is no place on earth like Unknown Country. It is the best website of its kind in the world. It is the biggest, and it offers a service that is not available anywhere else. It is of great value. And now, speaking of great value, here is Ann Strieber in a most unusual interview for Dreamland with Brent Marchant. Get the picture. And after that, our last report from Linda Moulton Howe until we can afford to get her back.
You're listening to Dreamland. Serious wonder spoken here.
Hi, this is Ann Strieber, and I am here today doing a wonderful Dreamland interview with Brent Marchant, who wrote a book called Get the Picture, Conscious Creation Goes to the Movies. Now, Brent, tell me, what in the world is conscious creation? I want to interject here that I rejected this book at first because I thought it was creationism, which is that anti-evolutionary stuff people are always trying to stick in high school textbooks, but it's not what it is at all, is it?
Right. I would never think of even writing a book, something like that.
Are you a scientist, Brent? What are you?
No, my background is a writer, as a journalist.
Uh-huh.
And I've worked for about 30 years as a freelance writer and editor.
But you're like me, you kind of got a Jones for science.
For science and also for metaphysics and also for movie. I've been a lifelong movie fan as well.
Me too. So I'm excited about this. So tell me what conscious creationism is.
Well, we've all heard the expression, life is what you make of it.
Yes.
And so often when we hear that, it sounds nice, but everybody looks at it and says, how do I do that? Conscious creation is a principle and a philosophy that's basically designed to help you look at the specific ways where you can make that happen. And it draws upon understanding the basic idea that the beliefs, thoughts, and intents that we hold and put out to the world are the ones, that end up creating the reality that appears in our world around us.
In other words, we create our own reality.
Exactly.
Now, quantum physics says this. It's a very simplistic way of putting what they say. But in What the Bleep, one of those that film, which I know you've seen.
Oh, it's a wonderful movie.
Oh, it is, and Fred Allen Wolf is in it. We've interviewed him on this show. One of these great quantum physicists, he's a top scientist in the world, stands up and says, I just get up every morning and say, it's going to be a good day, and what do you know, it is.
Absolutely. Well, one of the differences I would say between pure quantum physics and conscious creation is that a lot of quantum physicists, they know that there's some kind of X factor that drives this process, but a lot of times they haven't been able to come forward publicly and say what they think it is.
Yes.
They may quietly say that, yes, it's your consciousness, yes, it's your beliefs, but they haven't always been willing to go, on the record about that at this point.
They could just talk to each other because they don't want to get attacked by the rest of us.
Exactly. Now, people who practice conscious creation are willing to admit that, we think consciousness really is the X factor, and we're going to draw upon that to make use of the process to the fullest extent so that we can create the world and the reality that we want for ourselves.
Now, this isn't like that book called The Secret, is it? Because I find I'm rather critical of that because that seems to say that if you've got cancer or something, it's your fault.
Well, to a certain degree, yes, it is like that in the fact that in the in The Secret, they're talking about the notion of the law of attraction, where you end up drawing to you the things that you put out with your beliefs and your intents. And some of them you may like, and some of them you may not like. The trick is to understand, why you have drawn to yourself the things that you do want, and why you've drawn to yourself the things that you don't want. And in conscious creation, basically it comes down to examining what beliefs you're holding, because you may have ended up drawing something to you, or you may have ended up, holding some beliefs that have produced a negative result. The trick at that point is to rewrite the belief, so that you end up getting more of what you want and less of what you don't.
In other words, change your mind.
Exactly. When you see lots of cases of people who've had spontaneous remissions without the assistance of medication or chemotherapy and so forth, well, what accounts for that? A lot of times it does come down to a change in attitude by the person who's afflicted with the illness that causes the remission, to appear.
I've been in the hospital a few times, and I know some doctors, and they'll all tell you that they actually, when patients in the hospital, the nurses who come in and take your blood pressure and your temperature and all, they also monitor your mood, and they write it down in those little charts. Because if you are very blue and depressed, they know you are not going to do as well. This is a little secret of hospitals.
It certainly does make a difference. I mean, there have been some studies that have been done that show that patients who have a positive outlook oftentimes have a higher rate of recovery or a higher rate of successful treatment when it comes to some of these kinds of illnesses.
I mean, you can't necessarily cure yourself of cancer, but with whatever you're taking or whatever is being done to you, you will do better if you're positive.
Yes. Well, I remember I had read something years ago about a study that was done at one of the cancer centers where they found that people who played video games, where they were aggressively zapping cancer cells in the video game.
I read this study too. Yeah, tell us though.
And they tended to have a higher rate of recovery because they were very aggressively going after what it was they were trying to get rid of. And those who said, "Oh, I could care less about this," a lot of times didn't have nearly as much success.
Yeah, the fact that they were even thinking of passing those games out, especially in kids' cancer wards.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, now, what does all this have to do with movies, or how do you find these ideas in movies? Let's get off the medical talk and into the movie talk here, because we've just had the Academy Awards recently, so we're all movies are on our minds.
Well, the reason why I brought movies into it is that when I first started working with the conscious creation material, and I was using it successfully to bring about a lot of changes in my own life, people were asking me, well, how did you do it? And I recommended some of the source readings that I had worked with, and they found it to be kind of, theoretical and a little dry, and they just said, I don't quite get this. I need something a little bit more tangible to latch onto. Well, as I said, I've been a lifelong movie fan, and as I was studying conscious creation myself, I often found that when I was going to the movies or watching movies that I had on video or something, that, I was drawing a lot of inspiration from them because they were helping to reinforce the ideas that I was learning through conscious creation. So I decided, to help make this idea a little more reader-friendly or a little more user-friendly to those who want to learn it, tie the two together. Use movies to provide examples of some of the key principles and concepts that go into making conscious creation work. And some of the movies are certainly very obvious in terms of their intent, movies like What the Bleep and The Secret and so forth. But there are also others that are a little more, they show by example some of the things that you can do with this process to make it more successful in your life. And that's what I wanted to write about, was, giving readers examples of movies that they could look at to say, draw from this inspiration, because it'll help you to examine your beliefs and consequently, help you to identify what you want more of and what you want less of in your life.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think a better word than beliefs might be attitudes, because beliefs kind of suggest religion to a lot of people. And for a lot of people, live their religions pretty negatively. So, I mean, it's a broad term. What do you think about that?
You say tomato, I say tomato.
Yeah.
With a lot of these things, I think we oftentimes get so hung up on the wording that when you really look at what's behind it, it's really not that much different.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's like Christians. They are negative Christians, and they are who use, play the religion card to find people to hate, and they are positive Christians who are incredibly beatific and nice and love everybody, and these are supposed to be people of the same religion. And incidentally, we are going to, on the subscriber section, we are going to, speaking of religion, we are going to dissect the film Doubt. Brent is going to do it in the conscious creation way, and I am going to do it in the spiritual way. But and maybe we'll even disagree, and that'll be fine. Now,
well,
Brent,
if we each create our own realities, we're bound to have some disagreement at some point.
I guess we are. I guess we are. Well, there's a theory about the visitor experience, that one reason that they don't come out in the open is because there would be a clash of realities. Now, this is a theory quantum physicists have had. In other words, if we're all creating our own realities, then what happens when one reality comes up against another? Whose wins?
Exactly.
Which one wins? And
Well,
would
also-
it destroy ours?
And also, why do some people have the visitor experience and others don't?
Well, that's a perpetual question. I get asked that a lot, and I have a lot of ideas about that, but I'm not going to discuss them now because we're interviewing you. Now, you talk about studying conscious creationism, and do you learn this someplace? I mean, we studied the Gurdjieff work. And we went to a foundation, and people, talked to us about it and helped us meditate. Is there any place like this for conscious creationism?
Well, most of the research that I did this with came from reading the books of author Jane Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
She did some writing under her own material, under her own name, and she also did some channeled material through an entity that she called Seth.
Oh, yes.
book?
Whitley's been in touch with her. Yeah, we've never met her physically, but they've wanted him to speak a few times there. Mm-hmm.
And her books came out mostly in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
And they've been enjoying a bit of a resurgence over the past 10 years or so. And, there are groups and conferences that are organized where you can go and meet with other readers of this material, or you can certainly do it, on your own. But the thing that's, I think, most important is that the Jane Roberts books were very comprehensive in terms of exploring this question from so many different angles and so many different aspects. And even though she might not be a household name or the most famous of authors, she did come to influence really quite a few very popular metaphysical teachers who are out there today. When you look at the inside cover of one of the newest editions of her books, you see quotes there from the likes of Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson and Louise Hay, Richard Bach, Michael Talbot. I mean, she really had quite a profound influence on a number of people.
We knew Michael Talbot.
Okay.
Never met the others. I think I met Deepak Chopra once. Interesting. That's very interesting. Well, it's time to take a break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about Slumdog Millionaire, the Academy Award winner. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online with guest host Ann Strieber.
This is Whitley Strieber, and I'm very happy to announce that the Dreamland Festival is back. Dreamland Festival 2 will feature all the great Dreamland regulars, Linda Moulton Howe, Jim Mars, William Henry, Ann and Whitley Strieber, and our new regular, Marla Freese, who will be doing a gallery reading as well as individual psychic reading. She's a powerful psychic, so it should be exciting. Our theme this year is what we know and what we suspect. We're going to be telling you the things that we never really talk about because we can't quite prove. Linda Moulton Howe, for example, is going to be talking about the possibility that crop circles have been used in attempts to backwards engineer alien technology. Jim Mars is going to be giving you the alternative history of the world in 2 hours flat. William Henry is going to be talking about a new American Revolution. I'm going to be talking about my real experiences over the 11 years that I had contact with the visitors. Barely ever spoken about them before. Anne Strieber is going to talk about what she really experienced, what happened to her, and how she came to a new understanding of this, while at the same time trying to cope with her husband and her child, who were both having these extraordinary experiences. It's going to be a memorable. This conference is going to be held on the lovely campus of the Scarlett Bennett Center in Nashville. Rooms there will be running for only about $40 a night, so it's going to be a much more economical experience than it was last year as well. Don't miss this year's Dreamland Festival. There are 200 places only, so please sign up quickly. Go to the unknowncountry.com store, click on the latest tab, and you can sign up there.
Hi, Dreamland listeners. I'm back with Brent Marchant, spelled Marchant, and his book, Get the Picture, Conscious Creation Goes to the Movies, is fascinating, and we are going to talk about a movie. We are going to talk about Slumdog Millionaire, which I see as indicating parallel universes. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. I mean, is the guy rich or poor? Is the slum a happy place or a horrible place? Are people dancing in the street, or is this just, or coming out of the subway, or is this just how things look to whoever's perceiving it? And but I want to hear what Brent has to say about it. So what do you think about Slumdog Millionaire as an indication of conscious creationism?
Well, one of the things I found most fascinating about the movie was that, you know, the objective in conscious creation is to become consciously aware of the creations that we're drawing into our lives.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you know, the beliefs that are responsible for bringing that reality into being will go way back in our life. But the results may sometimes take a little while to materialize. And from the lead character, Jamal, one of the things I found fascinating was how he was able to create a life for himself that he wanted so badly by drawing upon all of the experiences that he had growing up. And the one thing that he was able to do successfully was consciously recognize the influence of these things in terms of how they, you know, how his experience led to the reality he was now experiencing once he got on the game show. There was a tremendous degree of synchronicity involved in that, and he had the presence of mind to recognize the synchronicity to help, you know, answer each of the questions that he was given once he appeared on the game show.
Yeah, they show when he's about to answer the question, you get a little flashback, if I remember correctly, of what caused him to have the right answer. Exactly,
and you know, even though those things may not have seemed significant as he was growing up, they were all leading to something, and they all led to this experience of appearing on the game show, where it just so happens that the experiences he had happened to be the answers to the questions that he was being asked, you know, that was going to bring about the life that he wanted to create for himself.
Well, you know, that's downright Freudian, really.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Although Freud thought it was our unconscious doing this, but you seem to think that it's more of that we can put this into the conscious mind.
We can. I'm not saying Jamal was really, you know, planning this out as a kid, you know, but he was amassing this information, making note of it, and when the time was right for him to make use of it, he did. The one thing that a conscious creator would say is that hopefully somebody who has gone through something like that would learn from that experience and say, okay, let me do this consciously from now on, so that, you know, when I want to achieve a particular objective or create a particular aspect of my reality in a certain way, I'll know how I've gotten there.
Well, psychologists tell us, and I in my own life, I see that they're right, that we keep making the same mistakes over and over again, and marrying the same type of bad guy, making the same business error, trusting the wrong type of people over and over. And Whitley and I have done this. Every once in a while we've said, okay, we're going to learn from the consequences. We're not going to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And in a way, that's kind of what you're saying, or am I wrong?
No, that is what I'm saying. And the trick, though, the added element to that is to understand what is the belief that keeps drawing you into circumstances, you know, that you don't want to find yourself in anymore, and then rewriting the belief.
The belief is that, for instance, that Irish guys who drink too much make good husbands.
Yeah, that would be an example. Or it may be that I'm not deserving of a better husband, or I'm not deserving of a better partner.
Uh-huh.
It could be something that came up in childhood and just sort of got stuck in this tape loop in your mind that you keep repeating over and over again. So when you go out to create your reality, if that's what you're working with, you can only imagine what kind of result you're going to get from it.
Well, we have a dear friend who keeps getting married over and over and always marries the wrong person, and we see the reason, but he can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all low self-esteem, and I guess a conventional psychologist would say, well, you've got to build up your self-esteem. You've got to, come talk to me and I'll help you do it. And I think these people are tremendously helpful, by the way. I think psychologists can be a real gift when you really need them. But I wonder, how would conscious creation address this? I mean, somebody who blows it time after time in the same way.
Well, one of the things that they say in psychology and psychiatry is that identification of the issue is half the battle.
Yes, that's true.
So what I would say from the conscious creation perspective is that identifying the belief is half the battle. And then once you've done that, you have the opportunity to rewrite it to a way that you is more conducive to what you want to achieve. Sometimes that involves really having to put a lot of effort into identifying where the belief arose in the first place.
Maybe catching yourself every day, looking for it.
Yeah, I mean...
There I go again.
I mean, for example, I've found a lot of times that if people get stuck with a particular belief, a lot of times it's something that arose, during childhood.
Oh, yes.
Or it arose from something that their parents taught them.
Yes, or inculcated in them.
Yeah, and they may be reluctant to change it because if they love their parents, they might say, well, if I'm changing a belief that they gave me and I love my parents, then,
I'm being disloyal.
I would be disrespecting them by doing that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When there's really nothing wrong with changing it. It's just recognizing that they gave you the best information that they thought they had, but that belief may not, it may have worked for them, it may not have, but it doesn't mean it necessarily is going to work for you. So from a conscious creation standpoint, that would be the point where you take it and rewrite it.
I love the way you say rewrite, because I am a writer, and of course my husband is a big-time writer, and it's very interesting. I never think of writing in that way. I never think of writing my attitudes or my beliefs or my goals, or, I think of writing a book, but you use the word writing.
Mm-hmm. Basically, because
and you're a writer,
and I'm a writer. You're writing the script of your life through
now
your
that's
belief.
Interesting, writing the script of your life, because we write scripts. Okay, writing the script of your life. Okay,
so if
has to have a happy ending.
If a particular plot twist doesn't work out quite the way you want, well, you scrap it and you put a new one in.
Well, you do that with regular scripts too. Okay,
exactly. So and that's very much what Jamal did in this movie, Slumdog Millionaire, where he didn't want to keep going on with the kind of ordeals that he had to face all throughout childhood. So he started the process of rewriting it as a kid. And when he had the opportunity as an adult, he could draw from all of those experiences that he created and drew to himself growing up to then turn it around and give himself a life that he wanted.
He no longer wanted to be a tea-walla.
Yes.
I thought that was a very interesting phrase.
Yes.
I think there are many of us who have been tea-wallas. I've slung some hash in my time. Well, that's very interesting. I was thinking, do you think any of the bright Technicolor, so much of Slumdog Millionaire, I think this might be why it won the Academy, although it should have just won cinematography or something, really, if that was what did it. But was shot in such bright colors, and it was almost like he was seeing the world through eyes which nobody else could. Certainly you or I going and looking at those slums would not, as the slums of Mumbai, would not see those colors or see that, would not have that attitude. Do you think the bright colors in the film had any special message about conscious creation?
Well, one of the things that conscious creation maintains is that, as in quantum physics, that there are infinite probabilities that we can choose from. And that creates a very kind of kaleidoscopic sort of view. So having the very bright colors throughout the movie, I would say, lends a lot of credence to the idea that, there's this kaleidoscope of life, or this kaleidoscope of existence that you can draw from if you choose to. What do you want? What would you most want to have for that? Do you want to have the existence of life in the slum, or do you want to draw to yourself, a better opportunity for yourself? And, here's this whole panorama of options that are open to you that you can pick any one you want.
And I think one thing that some of us who've tried to talk to friends in a psychological way have realized, I used to call it the yes but response, is that some people like to be miserable.
Yes. Well, one of the things I found that typically will trip up people when they get the yes but response.
Yes, you get that too.
Yeah, I'll say to them, what are you getting out of holding on to what you've got if it's something you don't like?
Yeah.
They don't have a yes but for that typically.
That's interesting.
Because they have to look at it and say, well, gosh, this is really making me miserable. What am I getting out of it? And that, I think, kind of opens the door for them to be able to then take the beliefs and start the rewriting process.
Well, it's interesting. Whitley and I, we're like most couples. We when we take long walks, sometimes we go over and over his family dynamics. I don't have any family, but maybe that's a blessing. But so there's only one family to do this with. But we talk about over and over and over again, what could have been different, what was the problem. And one of the things we've identified is stubbornness. It's kind of considered almost a virtue in American society. You don't give up. It's a little engine that could. But the negative side to it, stubbornness, really can mess up your life because you don't change.
Well, again, I would definitely go back to beliefs on that because they can be very persistent. Especially if they get entrenched at a very young age.
Yes, a little engine that could. I think I can. I think we all read that thing.
By hook or by crook, I'm not giving up this belief no matter how much you try to do it to me or how much you try to convince me otherwise because this is what I know, it's familiar, it's comfortable, and I don't want to change it.
Yeah. And even though things aren't going well today, I think it'll go better tomorrow if I just hold on to it. And Brent, on that note, we're going to take a break. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about our next film, which is Groundhog Day, which was one of my all-time favorite films. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Dreamland. Serious wonder spoken here.
Hey, Brent, we're back and we're ready to talk about Bill Murray and Groundhog Day.
What a funny movie.
It is. Now, can you sum that up a little bit for anybody who hasn't seen it? Because it was a while ago. By the way, I believe Bill Murray is a Gurdjieffian, but that's just neither here or there. But can you sum up the plot a little bit for us?
Sure. Bill Murray plays a self-absorbed weatherman in Pittsburgh, and at one point he's assigned to go do a remote location report on Groundhog Day in the small town of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
Which is where Punxsutawney Pete shows up every year. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So he goes there with his remote crew, which is a producer and a cameraman, and does his report. And he's just really terribly put out to be having to do any of this because it's such, he sees himself as being so worldly and sophisticated, and this is a small town, and he's just really having to go to such extremes to do this. So he does his report, and they're getting ready to head back to Pittsburgh when a blizzard ends up stranding them in the town. So as a result, he has to stay overnight. When he wakes up the next morning, it's Groundhog Day all over again. And it keeps being Groundhog Day all over again every day he wakes up.
Until he gets it right.
He's the only one, and he's the only one who knows it.
Yes. He meets the same people in the street. Yes. He goes down the stairs and he sees the same person, who asks him the same question.
And none of them remember anything happening before, but he does. He retains the memory of all these previous probable Groundhog Days that he's lived out, prior to that point. So the one thing that this does is, initially he decides to turn it into, a case of seeing what he can get away with. He becomes a womanizer and a thief, and gorges himself on food, but after
Because
a while,
he figures he'll be the same slim person tomorrow.
Exactly. He says, what's the difference? However, after a while, he begins to discover, is this really enough? So he starts to, play with the probabilities a bit more in terms of what he can be doing to change his existence in the town. And in the course of doing that, not only does he change the course of his existence, he changes himself. And he becomes a very, very different person over the course of the movie.
Well, now I believe he learns to play the piano and he learns to speak Italian.
Yeah, and also...
which is a hard language to learn. I know I've looked at it a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and also, he becomes much more generous. He becomes much more giving. He gives up womanizing in favor of romance. He brings joy into other people's lives, which is something that he hadn't done prior to that point. Prior to that point, his whole emphasis was, how can other people bring joy into my life? And
that was his belief system, really.
Yeah, exactly.
It was taking. He
completely turned it around.
And this, now at the end, does he ever get out of this time warp?
Well, critics and movie writers never give away endings of movies, so we'll have to let listeners see that for themselves.
Everybody's going to have to Netflix it to find out.
But
I didn't even get any product placement money for saying that.
It really is worth seeing, and one of the things that I find is been particularly interesting when I wrote the book is that comedies like this oftentimes are very good teachers for illustrating conscious creation principles because they're not threatening. There's a gentleness with the way they deliver their message that has a lot of impact without it feeling as though, you're being taught something here.
I think it's like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Yeah.
Mary Poppins, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it's very funny about comedy. This is, I don't know if this is apropos of your subject, but Whitley and I realized recently that the people we know who've been married the longest time all went on to a comedy movie on their first date.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, we did, and another couple we know did. I don't mean that everybody did, but I just thought that was interesting. It was like we decided to start with having a good laugh.
Well, they say that the couples that stay together the longest are the ones that laugh the most as well, too. So that wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Well, now it's very interesting. Groundhog Day. It's almost like it's saying there isn't enough time. We don't have enough time, so we have to use it all. I found this out. I mean, it's having more time as a gift, but we waste it so much when we just think we've got everything, we've got all the time in the world. It's almost like, I'm sure people who are on their deathbeds are getting really old would all sit down and tell us this. I was reading the book Tuesdays with Maury, and, of course, that's the main thing he talked to Mitch Albom about, was that, use your time. And I guess conscious creation, basically, that's one of the things you're saying, is use your time.
Well, not only that, but, one of the things that that Bill Murray ends up creating for himself in this movie, excuse me, is he gives himself the gift of time,
yes.
by being able to try out these different probabilities to see which one is going to, work best for him. Too many times, I think, we give ourselves the gift of time at different points in our lives and don't appreciate what we've done for ourselves.
Oh, yes.
I had a phase at one point back in the early 90s where I had been laid off from a editing job, and it was during the recession at that point.
Yes,
and
there were other recessions. Folks.
Yeah, and I was out of work for quite a while, and I'd gone into that phase really being kind of burned out, really. I'd been working very steadily for a long time, and it was, very tiring. And the first thing that I did when I got into that period was put my emphasis right away on, I got to go find another job. And it really was kind of foolish on my part because, I had the resources to be able to live fairly comfortably for a while afterward. But I just had this obsession with, I got to find another job. I got to find another job.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure many people are feeling that right now, so this is speaking to them.
Yeah, and the thing is, I didn't realize that I had given myself the gift of time to assess what's the next step. How do you want to live? What changes do you want to make? And because I had this, obsessiveness about finding work at that point, I didn't realize the gift of time that I had given myself to look at these other things more fully until actually after the fact.
And then you realized that you should have done it.
Yeah.
And, it's very interesting. I was reading the New York Times op-ed, that's called what the New York Times calls the editorial page, this Sunday. And I don't know when we're going to post this show yet, so I'm not going to say which Sunday, but it was very interesting that every single editorial on the page, and usually talking about foreign affairs or current events, but they were all talking about how the recession might lead people to lead more simple lives. Maybe we should quit being so obsessed with all this stuff and get more into what I would say, as I'm also a small student, a student of Buddhism in a small way. We should be getting more, enlightened and less obsessed with things, and maybe get a little bit more Zen in our lives here. And I thought this was a very unusual thing for New York Times editorial writers to be saying. And in a way, I think what you might be saying is that this is a chance for everybody to do this.
Absolutely. I think it's a time really to find out what's most important in our lives. And really that's what, that's what Bill Murray's character does in Groundhog Day. And I think to a very great degree, that's what a lot of people are starting to do in their everyday lives now.
And we're being forced to do it. It's such a shame that we don't go to the movies more and get inspired to do it when things are going well.
Well, I think the conditions have given us the added incentive to look at it more completely now than maybe we did in the past. I mean, certainly we could have done in the past, but we chose not to. Things were going along in ways that we thought were fine. So. Again, that goes back to the stubbornness question we were talking about earlier. Why change if you don't feel you have to? Even though, the underpinnings of bringing forth the kind of change that people are going through now were probably building up, all during that time leading up to this.
And you say, why change? But the truth is we're always changing. We can't help it. Our cells are changing, our brain cells are changing, our body cells are changing, the things that happen to us change us even if we don't want to change. And so we might as well go with it. We might as well say, okay, I embrace change. And what's interesting about learning from the movies, which is what you do, is, I'm sure you learn from other things too, but is it that just like in the last recession, which started in 1929, the Big Depression. I guess we had a recession in the 80s, but the movie box office is going crazy despite the fact that movie tickets are pretty expensive now, and popcorn is just incredible. I mean, it's just, you feel like you've really, you feel like all that money for just, a bunch of pop stuff, but bunch of hot air. But movie tickets are really going through the roof. The box office is big, and that happened the last time, too. So people are going to be able to go to the movies, and they're going to be able to come back and read your book, get the picture, and they're going to be able to learn what they need to learn about coping with the recession. And with that note, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about a classic. And talk about bright colors in Slumdog. That's nothing compared to this classic, which is The Wizard of Oz. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland Online with guest host Ann Strieber.
This is Ann Strieber back with Brent Marchant, author of Get the Picture, and it's Get the Picture ? Actually. Conscious Creation Goes to the Movies. And we are going to talk in this final segment, although we're going to have one more interview for subscribers about doubt, which Meryl Streep was absolutely brilliant in, and so was Philip Seymour Hoffman. But we're going to talk this time about an older movie, Wizard of Oz, which was certainly, I think everybody knows the Wizard of Oz. I mean, you've seen it on TV or what, but for those few who haven't, like they say when you take Southwest Airlines, for those few people who don't know how to fasten a seatbelt, for those few people who haven't seen it, give us a quick summation of it.
Well, a lonely Kansas farm girl who's unhappy with the way things are going in her world wants to find herself in a place where things are a lot nicer, the people are friendly, and so forth. And through the course of being caught in her house during a tornado, she ends up being transported miraculously to this wonderful place called Oz, in which everything in many ways is exactly what she's been looking for, although the people aren't always necessarily the friendliest. And once she's there, she enjoys her new surroundings and so forth. But she also misses home. She's trying to figure out a way to get back to her home, and she ends up going on sort of a road trip through the land of Oz to meet a wizard who is believed to be able to help her achieve her goal of getting back to where she is. Of course, once she's faced with that, she runs into further obstacles of will she be able to achieve this? How will she be able to achieve this, and so on.
I always thought The Wizard of Oz was about the fact that, among other things, that life is not what it seems. And a conspiracist would say, well, somebody's manipulating everything. Behind that green curtain. That's what Jim Mars would say. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, except for the fact that really the wizard has no real power. He creates a bluster and he ends up scaring people and so forth, but when it comes right down to it, he's a charlatan. It's all smoke and mirrors.
He really can't do anything.
No,
That's
he
true.
really can't.
In fact, she does it herself. Then she clicks those heels together. That's why the witch tells her to click her heels together.
Exactly.
She does it herself.
Well, and I think that's really, what this movie is, from a conscious creation perspective, is all about. It's teaching people the basics of how conscious creation works. One of the approaches to the process that Jane Roberts wrote about was something called the magical approach, which has to do with learning how to combine the influence of our intellect and our intuition to formulate beliefs that achieve the results that we want.
Well, I think intuition is very important, and scientists are starting to think that too.
And it's interesting that when Dorothy, the farm girl, gets to Oz, she ends up meeting people who reflect those very ideas. For example, when she meets the Scarecrow, he's in search of a brain. Well, in many ways, the brain is symbolic of the intellect.
Yeah, left brain, yeah.
And then she meets the Tin Man, who's in search of a heart, which in many ways is symbolic of the intuition. So you're seeing the magical approach start to play it out right with those very two characters. Then she meets the lion, and the lion is looking for courage. Well, that's symbolic of having, the gumption to want to go forward, to make changes in your life, to put forward beliefs that you want to achieve. So when you have these three companions with her, she's got three of the elements that she needs to make the magical approach work as a conscious creator in her life. And the further she goes through her little odyssey, she ends up meeting the witch, who keeps the Wicked Witch of the West, who keeps giving her challenges, which is sort of like her conscience,
yeah.
Keep her on path. Keep her on the path of going forward and learning this. She meets the Good Witch of the North, Glinda, who is, always providing loving support when she needs it. That's the role of, the greater forces of the universe, helping to co-create the things we want to bring in our lives. And, of course, she finally meets the Wizard, who shows her that he's not everything he's all cracked up to be.
So it's up to her.
And so it's up to her. And that's the realization she ultimately comes to, is that, she's had the power all along. It's coming from within her.
Now, speaking of having the power, before we close, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to ask you, as someone who has studied conscious creation, how might people either attract or avoid the visitors. Now, some people say, I don't want to ever see him again. And some people say, I want to see him. Does conscious creation have any suggestions about this?
Well, one of the things with conscious creation is that it always draws upon the idea that you get what you focus on.
Ah.
So, for example, if you believe that there are beneficial forces in your life, they will appear.
Huh.
Okay?
Now, that's interesting. A lot of people will wonder about that.
Now, if you believe that they're not a beneficial force in your life,
the evil alien theory,
they may still appear, because what you're doing there is you're saying what you don't want. You're still focusing on the item that you don't want to attract to you. What you would say instead is that you want to turn it from a negative into a positive, saying that my life will be normal and full of the things that I want to attract to myself. So
but those pesky guys will not be part of it.
I mean, it's sort of like the idea of saying to somebody, in the next 5 minutes, you can think of whatever you want except for a pink elephant.
And that's all they'll think about.
That's all they'll think about. So when you keep doing that, the pink elephant's going to keep showing up. So even if you were to say, I don't want the visitors showing up in my life, they're still going to keep showing up, because you're still feeding, you're still focusing on the idea of the visitor's presence, even if it's in a negative light. You need to figure out a way to rewrite the belief so that the visitors aren't part of the equation in the belief.
Yeah, and just part of your life. And, the most well-adjusted people I've met, and I've met a lot of them and read a lot of letters, are the people, the most well-adjusted people who having visitor experiences, have had in them in the past, maybe they're ongoing, are people who think like that. It's just part of life, but it's not just me. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to take over, and maybe did some scary things, and maybe I was scared, and I'm not sure who they are, what they are, if they're good or bad, but they're part of my life, but I've got other life too. Mm-hmm. And those are the most well-adjusted people, I find. It's the people who turn them into angels, who I kind of am skeptical of, because, I think they have their own agenda, and I don't think their agenda is to come here and, throw lollipops at us. But I also get very disturbed about people who go on and on about evil aliens, because whenever I get to know some of these people, I find that they're kind of maybe not such nice folks themselves. And I think that maybe they are projecting onto the visitors what they would like to do to others.
Well, that's conscious creation. I mean, if they're coming from beliefs of negativity,
yeah,
and they're putting it out there, then they're going to end up drawing back to them exactly what they're putting out.
Uh-huh. So in other words, bad stuff's going to happen to them the more they talk about those evil aliens.
Yeah, I mean, they become a mirror.
Oh, yes.
If you want to look good when you look in the mirror, well, then put out good thoughts. If you want to look bad when you look in the mirror, then put out negative thoughts. The choice really comes down to the individual in terms of, what their beliefs are and what they're putting out.
Well, I think, too, you mention visitor experiences being, or in conscious creation, too, being kind of like a mirror. And I've always found that what people say about the visitors is a very revealing mirror. And if you sit back in an audience and you're kind of skeptical like I am, and you kind of listen to this person with a different part of your brain, you begin to say, they keep talking about this. Are they really talking about themselves? I think I'm looking into a mirror here. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's really reflecting the visitors. It's very creepy. It's very, if you think about it that way, next time, folks, you go to a UFO conference, I think you'll get a lot more out of it.
I would say that, and it doesn't apply just to the visitors. I think it applies to the kinds of people that you're drawing to you in your everyday life. I mean, do you have good friends? Do you have people that you can't stand? Do you have, nasty neighbors? Do you have good neighbors? Good coworkers, bad coworkers? I think it all really comes down to, what you're putting out in the first place.
It could be, or maybe it could be that what the best thing to do is, if you've got somebody really nasty, is to just try to avoid them. Because they're a negative influence on your life.
Well, that would be one way of approaching it. Another, what I would do personally would be ask myself, why have I drawn this person into my life? Because I know that if this person is a reflection of something that I'm thinking, what is it then that I'm thinking that's making me draw these negative circumstances to me, and how can I change that?
Do you know there's an exercise they do in the Gurdjieff work called positive considering, which is basically when you have somebody at the office or a neighbor or something like that who's driving you crazy, and they're kind of attacking you. What you do is, instead of going into what they call negative considering, which is, thinking about all the bad things and you don't like about them, becoming obsessed and etc., is you start showering them with good stuff. You do favors for them. Mm-hmm. You work with them in the office and you go up and you bring them a cup of coffee, even if they did, or you ask if they want one, or maybe you bring them one just because you know they want it anyway. And you say, oh, don't worry, you don't need to pay me back. Or you adjust the fan so that it's keeping them cool. Or adjust the radio station to the station they like. And it really, I tell you, it just pulls the rug right out from under them. It's a very good way to deal with it.
Or another way would be, not everybody is all bad or all good.
Yes.
So start focusing on the things that you do like about that person and notice those more. And, maybe in the process you just may end up drawing out more and more positive attributes that you didn't realize were there or they had been buried. And, that may end up helping to override the negativity that this person is putting out on a more regular basis.
In other words, his dog loves him, so I can too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Brett, it's been great talking to you, and I want to say that everybody should get your book, Get the Picture, because it's tons of fun, and the movies are a nice place to go in the recession. Conscious creation is a nice attitude to have during the recession, and it's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe.
Well, as usual, we have an extraordinary report from Linda Moulton Howe today, but it is also a very sad day in Dreamland because Linda will not be with us for a while. She is going on hiatus because we have, like so many small businesses, lost our credit line and we can no longer afford to pay Linda on a regular monthly basis. We didn't lose our credit line because of non-payment or slow payment or anything. In the 10 years that we have had this credit line, we have paid every single installment on time or before and have repaid the line in full every year, as indeed we have done this year. This year, the bank will not tell us that we don't have the credit line. It will not tell us that we do have the credit line. It simply won't continue in silence. Therefore, Linda, Dana, Augustine, and just about everything else I can cut that costs money on a regular basis, I am cutting absolutely to the bone. If you happen to be in the banking industry or a wealthy individual who would like to extend UnknownCountry.com a credit line, knowing that we have a perfect record of repayment over a 10-year period, please do let me know. Write Whitley@Strieber.com because we need it now. Today, Linda Moulton Howe's EarthFiles.com, and I have to tell you my heart is very heavy right now, is going to report on the third cattle mutilation in 3 weeks in Colorado. And I will say this, that until Linda comes back, and I trust she will be able to come back soon, I will be doing a news segment at the beginning of the show, wrapping up news from the Out There section of Dreamland. I will be appearing in each program until we have our great science reporter back. And here she is, EarthFiles.com's Emmy Award-winning science reporter from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thank you, Whitley. And I know these are revolutionary times and that revolutions can go in many different directions. So I do hope that there is somebody out there who will understand we're trying to do honest work and will try to support us, no matter what the banks decide or don't decide to do. And in this revolutionary time, one piece that has continued for at least half a century are the unusual and very strange mutilations of animals around the world. I have reported on Dreamland and at Earth Files now in March 2 previous very strange mutilations of a pregnant cow or a cow that had given birth in western Colorado and was found by a creek, and then a 1-week-old calf found March 17th, eviscerated in a way that has baffled everyone. And now it comes that we have a third mutilation from which, if you were on a map, each one of these sites is not much more than 40 miles from each other and kind of a triangular pattern. Weston to Honey, Colorado, and now we're going up to 12 and a half miles south of Walsenburg. And on a map, Honey and this ranch are only about 20 miles apart. Honey is where the 1-week-old calf was decimated and its ears removed so strangely. And the Mike Duran cow was in Weston, which is about 30 to 40 miles away from Honey, and now we're up at Walsenburg, which would make the top of the triangle, a region that has had repeated animal mutilations since at least the early 1960s. And one of the Colorado ranchers there is Jim Guerin. He is 70 years old and retired from his CPA profession to full-time beef cattle breeding. He has 3 ranches, 2 in southern Colorado and 1 in Missouri. And one of these 2 Colorado ranches is 12 and a half miles southeast of Walsenburg, and that's only about 20 miles from Tom Miller's ranch in Honey, where that 1-week-old calf was found bloodlessly eviscerated on March 17th. 3 days later, on Friday, March 20th, Jim Guerin's ranch helper, Tim Myers, was checking on one of their 2.5-year-old heifers, pregnant for the first time and late in giving birth. Jim has been crossbreeding purebred Angus bulls and French Gelbvieh cows to produce a stronger, more muscular cow that has good marbling in its meat. The heifer was a healthy 1,100 pounds, one of his best crossbreeds, and Jim Guerin was eager to see her first calf. During Friday night, March 20th, it now appears she gave birth, licked her new male calf clean, and he probably suckled his first colostrum immune milk that strengthens newborns. The mother had him hide under a juniper tree, flat to the ground, to hide, perhaps because she wanted to graze for more strength before returning to her newborn calf. On Saturday morning, March 21st, around 11 a.m., Tim Myers, the ranch hand, was feeding range cubes to the herd and realized the special pregnant cow was missing. He went looking for her and found her dead. He called Jim Guerin, absolutely shocked.
He said, her bag is missing. And I said, what? He said, she doesn't have a bag, but there isn't any blood. And he didn't understand that. I couldn't either. So we started making some calls. He called the sheriff in Los Animas County, and the sheriff recommended that we call the brand inspector. And he called the brand inspector, and an hour or so later, the brand inspector joined him, and he took him to the site of the death. They looked all around, the brand inspector and Tim, to see if they could determine what might have happened. And they couldn't find any tracks. They couldn't find any blood. They didn't see any trauma on the cow. About 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon, they were walking circles around the area where we found the cow, and lo and behold, if we didn't find the baby calf. He was hid out underneath a tree. And the calf had been cleaned up, which a cow does. The afterbirth was not too far from the calf, and it had dried, and the calf was bawling and in apparent good health. So Tim took the calf, and we have some milk supplement that we were able to give him and fed him, and he ate it, and to this day he's eating the heck out of it and doing good. So we believe from that the calf had sucked the mother and got her first colostrum, or else he probably would have died. So we believe she had nursed the calf before her death, and she was about 50 yards away from where we found the calf.
That means that she gave birth somewhere in the night of Friday to Saturday, March 20th to March 21st, and apparently the calf was cleaned up and got some milk from her, and then after that comes this terrible thing that takes away her udder and kills her.
That's my supposition, and I believe that to be right because of the attitude and ability of this calf. He's doing real good, and you wouldn't expect a calf that had never got the first colostrum from the mother to do that way.
Could you describe both scenes?
Well, where the calf was found, a few yards away from the calf, we found the afterbirth that the mother had sloughed off, and we saw tracks of the cow. We actually didn't see any other tracks at all. The calf was more or less hid underneath a juniper tree. Really no disturbance other than just the afterbirth being laying there. And then we did see one little spot of blood, but I think that's where the cow had laid when she gave birth to the calf.
Close to where the calf was under the juniper tree?
Yeah, it was pretty close. Not right in the same spot, but reasonably close. So it looks like what I'm saying probably happened was the calf was born there, was cleaned up there, and there was some blood there from the mother, which is natural. And then I think the calf got up and nursed, and I think the mother hid the calf underneath the branches of the juniper tree. And then around the mother, she is also under a juniper tree. The only blood I saw was there was a little blood on her hind leg, which would be consistent with her sloughing off the afterbirth. It was dried, caked, and normally a cow will have some blood on her legs from that. And around where the udder had been removed, I could find no traces of blood at all. The cuts were just perfect. They were bigger than the actual udder would have been, and they just cut the hide and pulled the udder out. But none of that has been cut. Her stomach had never been torn open. Her rectum had not been torn open. Her head, I couldn't find any signs of trauma, which you would look for if a lion had killed her or something like that. And I could not see where her feet had moved the ground in any fashion. She was laying on her left side, and her feet were sticking out, and normal tranquilization or something like that, a cow will move her feet before she goes under. Nothing. I couldn't see any sign that she'd ever moved her feet at all. We felt all over. We couldn't feel any holes or outside entry points to indicate that she'd been shot. But I don't believe that there's a human alive that could cut that udder off that cleanly without spilling some blood.
Right, and especially she was pregnant, had just given birth, and that udder should have been engorged with milk and blood.
Should have been plumb full with milk.
There was no fluid.
No fluid. There wasn't a wet spot on the ground. And we circled all around looking for anything we could find, like a bare spot maybe where the grass had been killed or whatever. And we made several circles around, at least as far as 50 yards out, because we went out to where we found the calf. And there's been 4 of us do that, and no one has seen any tracks, anything other than cow tracks. We did see some cow tracks.
And her body in the photographs that Chuck Zukowski took is so clean, and I wondered if even that is normal, that birds or other predators have not really done anything to her body since Friday night.
Well, my experience with dead cows, and we have in the past had some dead cows from poison weed. And my experience is that shortly after they die, the crows will peck their eyes out, and a coyote will tear out the rectum. Now, as of Saturday evening, none of that had happened. Sunday, we went back out there Sunday about 9:30, and the eye was still intact, which tells me the crow never got on her, but a coyote had eaten out her rectum, and so there was a pretty good hole in there on Sunday. It wasn't there on the first pictures that we took. None of that is skin had not been broken there.
The mother is lying 50 yards away from her newborn on her left side with no apparent signs of struggle, no tracks, no blood around the excision of this big udder that would have been engorged with milk and blood. Whatever came for the mother, why wouldn't it have gone after the newborn calf as well?
I can't answer that, and it puzzled us too, except I've observed over the years that when a cow, particularly when she just has a calf, and after it's had its first nursing, will what we call hide a calf. And she will pick a spot, and the calf will lay down, and the calf will not raise its head. It will not move. It is invisible. And that's the nature of the cow, and that's the way we found the calf. The only way that actually we found it, Tim's wife heard it bawl, and I suspect it was getting hungry and was bawling for the mother, in which normal circumstances after it's eaten and everything, it won't bawl, it won't move, it just lays really as flush to the ground as it can lay. And that's their nature of protecting that calf. But normally the mother will stay pretty close to it. She usually will get some help from another cow to babysit it when she needs to go get some water and that sort of thing. How they communicate all that, I can't tell you, but that's what we've observed. And it would appear to me that the cow was possibly out away from the calf grazing when her death occurred.
Had you ever had animal mutilations anywhere else you've ranched?
No, I have not.
So this is your first.
This is my first.
And what is your reaction?
Well, I'm sickened because I had put in a lot of effort to raise these particular heifers, the genetics that I'm using to grow them, and I have some theories that I've exercised in terms of how quickly I breed them and that sort of thing, and she was just perfect. And I was just hate like heck to lose one like that. And the calf was approximately 80 pounds, and he was just in super health and super strong for just being as young as he was. And that's the way all of these heifers' calves are, so I'm having great expectations for the production of this animal that I'm developing. And so I'm very, very sad that I lost her. But my own impression today is that the cutting off of the udder, I don't believe there's a human alive that could cut it that cleanly and not cause some blood to flow. I just don't see it's possible. The second observation I have is I don't see how animal or human could cause that cow to die as big and strong and young as she was without stirring up or having some marks visible on the ground. I don't believe there's a man or a horse alive that could have roped her and made her go down without showing some signs of it. And I certainly don't believe it was an animal, because we have lost cattle, mostly calves, to lions, and we've lost some to what we believe were coyotes. And in all cases, meat was eaten. The lion went through their stomachs to get to his dinner, and the coyotes go through the rectum to get to theirs. None of this was on this cow when we saw her on Saturday. So I've got to eliminate animals as I know what they do, and I've got to eliminate in my mind man, because I don't think there's any way that could have happened. We don't have electricity on the ranch. There's no signs of any tracks or anything like that. We're so remote, it would have been virtually impossible for someone to walk to where this event happened. You could have gotten there horseback. We do it all the time, but we found no horse tracks at all. So I'm left to say it is something extraterrestrial. That's all I can assume it can be. Whether it's a little green man or what, I don't know, but I don't believe that either human or animal, as I know them, could accomplish this.
Eyewitnesses have described beams coming down from the sky into pastures, and in fact, I have half a dozen people who have said they have seen animals rise in these beams, and others have seen animals drop to the ground from these beams or animals placed by these beams. What is this beam technology? I don't know, but the beam technology, for lack of a better word, has been associated with the animal mutilation phenomenon around the world for at least half a century.
I'll be darned. I did not know that.
That would explain at least how your wonderful cow might have been selectively taken vertically from the pasture and then returned vertically.
Yeah, that would explain why we don't see any tracks or signs.
Right.
And, of course, if the surgery was done somewhere other than where she was at, that would explain why we don't see any blood. I've talked to some of the neighbors. Tim has talked to quite a few of our neighbors. I have a couple of partners that partner on some cattle with me, and I've talked to them. I've talked to some veterinarians, and really no one has a clue. They just say we can't believe it.
Does anybody bring up the possibility of something from outer space?
Oh, yeah. Most of them say it's got to be something that we don't know what it's about.
And when people speculate and contemplate something extraterrestrial or from outer space, what do they say to you?
Well, they just basically say it's technologically above our ability to understand it and shrug their shoulders and say, I don't understand it, but it has to be something like that that could accomplish what happened without leaving any signs or traces.
Have any of your neighbors around the ranch south of Walsenburg, have any of them had mutilations in the last year or two?
Well, the closest one would be this Tom Miller that you're talking about.
In Honey?
Yeah, Honey is probably 20 miles from our ranch. And I don't know Mr. Miller, so I really couldn't call him a neighbor, but that's the closest of anyone that I know of.
When you saw the photograph that Chuck Zukowski took of that 1 week old calf laid out on Tom Miller's flatbed truck, what was your first reaction and thought?
I just couldn't understand it. I just saw a head and front legs and 2 hind legs with a gap in the middle. I could not understand. Again, there wasn't even any height between the head and the hind legs.
Right. I've never seen that.
No, I've never seen anything like it.
And I have photographs of the Walsenburg cow that are really quite amazing, taken Saturday morning, and to try to imagine that this was just hours before a pregnant, healthy cow that gave birth to that calf and then suddenly ended up like you see in the photographs. It sums up the high strangeness of animal mutilations around this world, and it reminded me of another one of those cases that haunts you for your entire professional life. And that goes back to September 9th, 1982, when I was working as Director of Special Projects at the CBS station in Denver, and this was a couple of years after my first documentary for television, A Strange Harvest, had been broadcast. And I got a call from Bill and Linda DeZuris, ranchers east of Colorado Springs. And on September 9th, 1982, they had a group of pregnant cows in a pasture only about a half mile from their ranch house. And Bill and Linda were working outside all day long, painting and working on the exterior of their home. They had a 6-year-old pregnant cow that they were especially watching. She was getting ready to birth, and they had checked on her at noon. They never went back in the house. They were outdoors all day. At 5 o'clock, Bill got in his semi-truck to go for a load of hay, and he saw the black and white cow down in the pasture where they were keeping these pregnant cows. He called Linda from a phone down the road and asked her to check on the cow that he thought might be giving birth. Linda DeZuris told me that she was so stunned by what she found that it was hard for her to do anything, let alone walk toward it. And in an interview, she said, quote, half of the udder was gone. You could see into the stomach cavity. The eyes were bulging out. I was horrified at the thought of what could do this in broad daylight when we had checked the cows only a few hours before, close quote. There were only 5 hours between the cow being alive and well and then dead and bloodlessly mutilated so close to the ranch house. And when you see the photographs from my book, An Alien Harvest, that I'm putting in this report at earthfiles.com, and think that this is a pregnant cow, and a perfect half of the udder is removed, and there is no blood at all. The cow's rectum was also cut out in an oval about 18 inches wide. The Dezuruses did not pay for a necropsy, and they only assumed the calf was still inside the dead cow. But was it? Deputy Kelso from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office arrived to see the cow the next day and wrote in a report, quote, cut by some type of instrument, close quote. That was a pregnant cow mutilation that baffled both owners and the sheriff's deputy. My own hypothesis after all of my field investigations and interviews with eyewitnesses is that a non-human aircraft hovered unseen and silently over the Dezurus Ranch that afternoon of September 9th, 1982, and selectively picked up that cow, excised the tissue, and returned the cow to the pasture. And my hypothesis extends to March 2009 and the 3 extraordinary cases in southern Colorado. You can explain the cows better by something picking them up vertically and returning or dropping them vertically than you can find any way to get to these cows and do what has happened, 3 strange mutilations in 3 weeks. And the ranchers there, Whitley, are telling me they just have this strange feeling that it's not over, that there will be more.
Well, Linda, why wouldn't there be more? It seems as if we are parting company for a while at a time when things are really getting hot all around the world. And, of course, we'll do our best to keep ahead of all of this news. I would like to thank you, Linda, for 10 years of uninterrupted service to Dreamland with Whitley Strieber, and I don't remember how many years before that with Art Bell. And
yes, and people can keep going to Earth Files and click back to Unknown Country and go to Earth Files, and that way we at least synergistically can keep up with news.
With the news, and we will certainly be reminding everybody in every show to go to earthfiles.com as often as possible. Thank you very much, Linda Moulton Howe, and it is
about that at this point.
They could just talk to each other because they don't want to get attacked by the rest of us.
Exactly. Now, people who practice conscious creation are willing to admit that, yeah, we think consciousness really is the X factor, and we're going to draw upon that to make use of the process to the fullest extent so that we can create the world and the reality that we want for ourselves.
Now, this isn't like that book called The Secret, is it? Because I find I'm rather critical of that, because that seems to say that if you've got cancer or something, it's your fault.
Well, to a certain degree, yes, it is like that. In the fact that in the Secret, they're talking about the notion of the law of attraction, where you end up drawing to you the things that you put out with your beliefs and your intents, and some of them you may like, and some of them you may not like. The trick is to understand, why you have drawn to yourself the things that you do want, and why you've drawn to yourself the things that you don't want. And in conscious creation, basically it comes down to examining what beliefs you're holding, because you may have ended up drawing something to you, or you may have ended up, holding some beliefs that have produced a negative result. The trick at that point is to rewrite the belief, so that you end up getting more of what you want and less of what you don't.
In other words, change your mind.
Exactly. When you see lots of cases of people who've had spontaneous remissions without the assistance of medication or chemotherapy and so forth, well, what accounts for that? A lot of times it does come down to a change in attitude by the person who's afflicted with the illness that causes the remission, to appear.
I've been in the hospital a few times, and I know some doctors, and they'll all tell you that they actually, when patients in the hospital, the nurses who come in and take your blood pressure and your temperature and all, they also monitor your mood, and they write it down in those little charts. because if you are very blue and depressed, they know you are not going to do as well. This is a little secret of how...
Yeah, a little more reader-friendly or a little more user-friendly to those who want to learn it. Tie the two together. Use movies to provide examples of some of the key principles and concepts that go into making conscious creation work. And some of the movies are certainly very obvious in terms of their intent, movies like What the Bleep and The Secret and so forth. But there are also others that are a little more, they show by example some of the things that you can do with this process to make it more successful in your life. And that's what I wanted to write about, was giving readers examples of movies that they could look at to say, draw from this inspiration, because it'll help you to examine your beliefs and consequently, help you to identify what you want more of and what you want less of in your life.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think a better word than beliefs might be attitudes, because beliefs kind of suggest religion to a lot of people. And for a lot of people, live their religions pretty negatively. So, I mean, it's a broad term. What do you think about that?
You say tomato, I say tomato.
Yeah.
With a lot of these things, I think we oftentimes get so hung up on the wording that when you really look at what's behind it, it's really not that much different.
Yeah. Well, it's like Christians. They are negative Christians, and they are who use, play the religion card to find people to hate, and they are positive Christians who are incredibly beatific and nice and love everybody, and these are supposed to be people of the same religion. And incidentally, we are going to, on the subscriber section, we are going to, speaking of religion, we are going to dissect the film Doubt. Brent is going to do it in the conscious creation way, and I am going to do it in the spiritual way. But and maybe we'll even disagree, and that'll be fine. Now,
well,
Brent,
if we each create our own realities, we're bound to have some disagreement at some point.
I guess we are. Well, there's a theory about... I want to interject here that I rejected this book at first because I thought it was creationism, which is that anti-evolutionary stuff people are always trying to stick in high school textbooks, but it's not what it is at all, is it?
Right. I would never think of even writing a book, something like that.
Are you a scientist, Brent? What are you?
No, my background is a writer, is a journalist.
Uh-huh.
And I've worked for about 30 years as a freelance writer and editor.
But you're like me, you kind of got a Jones for science.
For science and also for metaphysics and also for movie. I've been a lifelong movie fan as well.
Me too. So I'm excited about this. So tell me what conscious creationism is.
Well, we've all heard the expression, life is what you make of it.
Yes.
And so often when we hear that, it sounds nice, but everybody looks at it and says, how do I do that? Conscious creation is a principle and a philosophy that's basically designed to help you look at the specific ways where you can make that happen. And it draws upon understanding the basic idea that the beliefs, thoughts, and intents that we hold and put out to the world are the ones, that end up creating the reality that appears in our world around us.
In other words, we create our own reality.
Exactly.
Now, quantum physics says this. It's a very simplistic way of putting what they say. But in What the Bleep, one of those that film, which I know you've seen.
Oh, it's a wonderful movie.
Oh, it is, and Fred Allen Wolf is in it. We've interviewed him on this show. One of these great quantum physicists, he's a top scientist in the world, stands up and says, I just get up every morning and say, it's going to be a good day, and what do you know, it is.
Absolutely. Well, one of the differences I would say between pure quantum physics and conscious creation is that a lot of quantum physicists, they know that there's some kind of X factor that drives this process, but a lot of times they haven't been able to come forward publicly and say what they think it is.
Yes.
They may quietly say that, yes, it's your consciousness, yes, it's your beliefs, but they haven't always been willing to go, on the record.
Hospitals.
It certainly does make a difference. I mean, there have been some studies that have been done that show that patients who have a positive outlook oftentimes have a higher rate of recovery or a higher rate of successful treatment when it comes to some of these kinds of illnesses.
I mean, you can't necessarily cure yourself of cancer, but with whatever you're taking or whatever is being done to you, you will do better if you're positive.
Yes. Well, I remember I had read something years ago about a study that was done at one of the cancer centers where they found that people who played video games, where they were aggressively zapping cancer cells in the video game.
I read this study too. Yeah, tell us though.
And they tended to have a higher rate of recovery because they were very aggressively going after what it was they were trying to get rid of. And those who said, "Oh, I could care less about this," a lot of times didn't have nearly as much success.
Yeah, the fact that they were even thinking of passing those games out, especially in kids' cancer wards.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, now, what does all this have to do with movies, or how do you find these ideas in movies? That's really, let's get off the medical talk and into the movie talk here, because we've just had the Academy Awards recently, so we're all movies are on our minds.
Well, the reason why I brought movies into it is that when I first started working with the conscious creation material, and I was using it successfully to bring about a lot of changes in my own life, people were asking me, well, how did you do it? And I recommended some of the source readings that I had worked with, and they found it to be kind of, theoretical and a little dry, and they just said, I don't quite get this. I need something a little bit more tangible to latch onto. Well, as I said, I've been a lifelong movie fan, and as I was studying conscious creation myself, I often found that when I was going to the movies or watching movies that I had on video or something, that, I was drawing a lot of inspiration from them because they were helping to reinforce the ideas that I was learning through conscious creation. So I decided, to help make this idea.
This is Whitley Strieber. Before we start today, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that I will be doing a weekly news update at the beginning of every program starting next week. And the bad and extremely sad news is that Linda Moulton Howe is going on hiatus because of the inability of our company to continue to pay her salary. After 10 years of being a very good customer of our bank, of paying our credit line religiously on time for all of those years, our bank has abandoned us, and we no longer have a credit line at all, like so many small businesses. It has nothing to do whatsoever with our credit and everything to do with the crisis that the banking industry is in now. Unfortunately, this means that we are no longer able to afford Linda Moulton Howe and Dana Augustine, and there are likely to be reductions in other areas of the website at all. Hopefully, we will eventually be able to increase our subscriber base and the wonderful service that Unknown Country offers, both to its subscribers and as a free service, will be able to continue and expand the way it should. There is no place on earth like Unknown Country. It is the best website of its kind in the world. It is the biggest, and it offers a service that is not available anywhere else. It is of great value. And now, speaking of great value, here is Ann Strieber in a most unusual interview for Dreamland with Brent Marchant. Get the picture. And after that, our last report from Linda Moulton Howe until we can afford to get her back.
You're listening to Dreamland. Serious wonder spoken here.
Hi, this is Ann Strieber, and I am here today doing a wonderful Dreamland interview with Brent Marchant, who wrote a book called Get the Picture. Conscious Creation Goes to the Movies. Now, Brent, tell me, what in the world is conscious creation? I want to